A Night in the Woods is a game by Amy Dentata. It's the second game of hers that I played after playing through 10 Seconds in Hell, which I looked at after seeing it place on Annie McClure's Top 20 Games of 2013 list. And I really like both this game and 10 Seconds in Hell a lot, as well as Amy Dentata's other work. Both this game and 10 Seconds in Hell are short, first-person games where you poke around a space and watch a story play out. 10 Seconds in Hell has a kind of roughness to it that I think really works well, which makes sense considering it was a jam game. But it actually suits the subject material very well. This game has a more polished exterior to it, which I think also kind of works well for this game's story. I really like the aesthetic sensibilities of this game, the way it borrows from early PC RPGs, early 3D first-person PC JRPGs like Ultima Underworld and games like it, System Shock, what with the frame around the screen and the inventory management and the little text up across the bottom on the paper. I think that this is a very cool, unique game, and I really like the way it has this kind of subtle, weird story to it that plays out, because the way it structures itself, it makes you feel like it's a horror game, so you start expecting like a scary thing to pop out, and then you kind of realize that that's not exactly the kind of game that this is, so you feel like it's not scary, but then it kind of becomes scary again after you think about it for a little while. So it kind of trades in spur of the moment kind of tension and fear in favor of a kind of slow building existential dread. And it also works, I think, because the game also has a sort of a playfulness to it. Like there's a whole lot of really funny little text blurbs like this one. And so there's a weird satire element to it, in addition to this cool approach to horror. And it all takes place in this very classically presented, pretty, first-person world. A lot of what I'm saying is also covered really well in this Paul Hack article, and I really like Paul Hack both because he's a very talented writer, and he looks out for interesting, cool indie games, and also because he's the first person who covered any of my games, so that's kind of nice. And right here I'm kind of honing in on the sprite rotation, and I'm sorry about all the flickering with the frame. That's just a weird kind of technical glitch, but it obviously doesn't look like that in the game. And yeah, Paul Hack was the first person to cover any of my games, so that was cool to see him talk about what makes Amy Dentata's work so interesting in a really elegant and concise way. I'll also post a link to her games, 10 Seconds in Hell, and also to her Patreon page in the description. And obviously there's a couple narrative thorough lines that are developing in... This is the best joke in the game, by the way. There's a couple of narrative thorough lines that are developing over the course of all these little text blurbs, and one of the most obvious is this idea that we are in some kind of post-apocalyptic world after the downfall of society because of a variety of reasons, and that's a very rote setting for video games, and so I think approaching it from this very kind of restrained perspective and then adding to it with these little text blurbs is a really interesting way of going about it. It's honing in on this one specific act of the post-apocalyptic experience, and that's walking around alone, cold, and just needing food. Not even needing food, just needing warmth and a place where you can sleep safely, and not knowing that you'll be able to find that. And I think that makes this game a very interesting experience. I think a lot of what makes A Night in the Woods very effective is the protagonist and the voice of the protagonist, because there's a number of things that differentiate the protagonist from the player. The most obvious one being that the protagonist can't read, and just the fact that the player is playing the game and recognizing and reading the text means that they are different from the player in that respect. And also, just this very, very natural acceptance that they need to find a place to sleep tonight and make a fire, or else they could freeze to death. And that's just accepting that as normal. And I think that kind of horror, that kind of horrible situation being accepted as completely normal, is something that a lot of post-apocalyptic games don't really touch on too deeply, and because a lot of them involve people who have already lived through the fall of civilization or whatever, so they know what things were like previously, and that makes this for a different experience, just the kind of mundanity of the end of the world, or the end of civilization, and that can be more horrifying, I think, than the much more strong emotional reactions in something like The Last of Us, which I love. Not to hurt The Last of Us. But there's a lot of things that are more powerful when they're mundane, like love stories, I think. Because a lot of true things are very mundane, and love can be very mundane, and horrors can be very mundane. And when you approach things from that perspective and make games like this, then I think you can kind of tap into a more natural tone that can end up being a lot more effective. And right here is where the game starts to really flex its horror muscles, up here with the next ramp, once I find it, because at this point they've set the stage with the red herring of the Tin Man, so we don't know if we're safe, we don't know if we're going to get struck by somebody, if there's going to be a jump scare or anything. And then they have this lengthy, horrible ramp that the protagonist even draws attention to in a short second by saying that this ramp doesn't make any sense. It's almost as kind of a Silent Hill 2 structure of just impossible architecture. And it's just this climb up the ramp with the way the music builds is just very intense. But again, the game isn't really that kind of horror game. So it tricks you into feeling like you're that you're gonna die. And then when you don't feel that, then you start to feel a sense of relief. But after that sense of relief hits, the game kind of pulls you back into that horror. Just the slow dread and recognizing the sadness of this situation. And the lovely song just kind of underscores all of that. That there is this utterly mundane, horrid possible future. And it's that mundanity that makes it so potent and real and ultimately so unsettling. And this isn't to say that A Night in the Woods or Amy Dentata's work adopts like a naturalist tone to it, like something like a Mike Leigh movie where it is designed to feel as true to life as possible, because it obviously isn't. It embraces all of these video gamey abstractions of the inventory and the locked key and the collectibles, and those abstractions are in a way kind of what make it so potent and powerful. Just like this is even more obvious in 10 Seconds in Hell. And this is the ending screen, by the way. This is the end of the game. The last quote is, "I hope I can survive the night." And this is even more true in 10 Seconds in Hell, where all of the characters and items are represented by just abstract boxes, and the voice narration is a computer-generated voice. But with this kind of video gamey abstraction and embracing meaning and theme, these games kind of come together to create these very abstract but powerful experiences. I'm talking just kind of off the cuff here, but these are just kind of how I feel playing these games. And I really, really like Amy Dentata's approach to game design, and I like this approach to meaning, and I like this approach to telling stories, and I'm really interested in seeing more of her work. And again, I posted a link to her games and her Patreon and the Paul Hack article, and I hope you give them a look. I think they're all really, really cool.